Like you saw at the beginning of the video, today I'm going to be walking you through my entire process using Blender and After Effects to make some interesting visual effects. Before we get started, I just want to talk about today's sponsor, Artlist. Artlist just released its brand new AI voiceover tool, and it's a lifesaver for us video creators. It's the first creative asset platform that offers voiceover generation using AI. The high quality voices will streamline your entire workflow and make your videos sound more professional than ever. Just take a listen to this sample to see for yourself.
This is Artlist's voiceover tool for video creators.
The service is super simple. Just select the right voice that you want to use, type in what you want the AI to say, and then change the voice settings to your liking. Finally, just click generate and then you can download your audio file in just one click. It's really that easy. The voices are exclusive to Artlist and made by professional voice actors. My favorite thing is the ability to change the emotional range to add some depth based on how I want the voice to actually sound. It's built for video creators first, so you can be sure that it'll meet all your quality standards. AI voiceovers are the next step in Artlist's vision to give creators everything you need to create amazing content. VoiceOver is included in all of the Max plans, as well as a standalone plan that just includes the VoiceOver service. If you're interested in checking out Artlist's VoiceOver or any other of their impressive asset catalog, you can check them out down in the description and pin comment down below. Thanks again to Artlist for sponsoring this video, but anyways, let's hop into the tutorial. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And now I will say this is going to be kind of my entire workflow, and so it's not going to be really as step-by-step tutorial based as some of my other videos. If you are interested in following along, I do have some files you can download down below. The footage we're actually going to be using today is from a previous sponsor of the channel, Motion Array. And so if you are interested in actually purchasing the footage and all of the amazing perks that they offer, I'll have an affiliate link down below where you can check them out. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. First, I want a camera track, so I'm going to go to VFX Motion Tracking, and let's open up the footage. Here is my footage. Let's just open that in. Now I do have to go ahead and set this to be sRGB, and I'll set the color management to standard just so we get some more accurate colors in there. And quickly, I'm just going to set these scene frames and prefetch our footage down here. Now, this is an amazing footage. They have amazing high quality footage, and so we can really see a lot of detail in here, and there's not a lot of noise in the scene. Two things that are really, really challenging if you are used to camera tracking. Anyways, we'll go ahead and camera track this. I'm going to go set match to previous frame, normalize on. Let's set the correlation to a 0.9. Like there, and then we'll go ahead and detect some features. I'll push this up and 0.01, distance to an 80. These are just kind of things I always do no matter what I'm camera tracking. Control T to track to the end, add some more features at the end. Control Shift T to track backwards. If you're used to the channel, this is my entire process. That gets pretty good camera tracking results. Let's go ahead and go to 150. I'll detect some more features. Just Control T and then Control Shift T backwards, just so we have a beginning, middle, and end, like I always teach. Anyways, we need to do some manually getting out some of the bad tracking markers. I'll notice this spike right here, so I'll go ahead and delete that in my graph. And then down here, I'll just kind of eyeball some things. So I do notice some people kind of walking and some of the tracking markers sticking to that. So we don't want that in our scene. Also down here, I noticed somebody as well. And I think that is pretty much it. Blender might be able to get out all the tiny imperfections here and there. So yeah, now we can go ahead and come to the Solve tab. And the A and B keyframe is the place with the most amount of parallax. So I'm going to try 120 to 160 today. That is the area where I notice a lot of camera movement right there. Let's refine everything there and solve the camera motion. Okay, so we got a 1.52. Let's get that a little bit lower. I'm going to clean up some of the tracks, and I'm just going to push this to around like a 1, we'll say, and delete all of those tracks and solve our camera motion again. Okay, so we got a 0.4 now. Let's clean it up a few more times. I think we can get it even lower than that. So I'll just select that many tracks and delete all of those. And we should be able to get below a 0.3 at least. And so just give it a sec. There we go. A 0.23 is totally fine for me. That is going to give us a pretty accurate solve for this scene. Next thing we need to do is go ahead and set up some things. So I'm going to right click, join the areas up here. We can go ahead and set up the background and tracking scene. We'll delete some of this stuff that Blender automatically sets up here. The only thing I want is the the camera and the ground. We'll go to the background. I'll delete that view layer. And then in the compositing section, we'll just go ahead and delete these two nodes. We might need some of these other nodes later. Anyways, let's go back to motion tracking. We do need to go ahead and orientate our scene. So what I actually like to do for this scene, we'll go to like frame 80, I think. Then we'll come up here. We have some nice kind of cubes on the ground. And so I'm actually going to use that for some of our floor plane. So I'm going to use this cube right here. I actually like this one a lot. We'll go ahead and control click the middle of all of these blocks right here. And then all I really need is just basically 10 frames for all of these to be tracked. So I'll go ahead and press this button down here like 10 times or so. So now we just have this section right here. We do need to solve the camera motion. And you can see our solve actually hasn't changed. That is good. We'll go ahead and come down here, set the floor orientation, and now the floor is actually correctly rotated in our scene and everything. We'll go ahead and set the origin and the x-axis just to be safe. But now we need to set up the scale. So select these two objects right here, set the scale, and I believe in testing it was about 6 meters across. And so we'll just set 6 right there, and there we go. That is pretty much our camera tracking done. We can come out to the layout tab and just kind of see everything is looking accurate, and it does. You can see everything is looking very nice and camera tracked, and everything is looking like it's sticking. So that is very important. Next, let's come and play around with some things. So first of all, I'm just gonna, move my floor plane around, just scale it up a little bit. I do notice we're dealing with some clipping and stuff up here. So I'll come to my camera, go to the camera settings, come down here, and I'll set the start and end to be something high, something like that. So we're not dealing with any of that clipping before. Yeah, so that is looking pretty good and matching our ground plane. Now I do want to have my actual CG object on this fountain right here. So that does mean we do have to go ahead and actually model this fountain out. That is actually relatively easy. We can come up and Shift A, we'll go to Mesh Cylinder, and then I'll kind of place my cylinder over here, right in the middle, right there. And then I do want to go ahead and make sure it's on the ground plane. So I'll go ahead and make sure it's sitting on my ground plane right there. That is looking good. And now we can go ahead and start modeling this out. So I'll hit S, I hit Shift Z to actually scale that in every direction but the Z axis right there. And then now I think this fountain is a little bit oval shaped, so I'll hit S and then maybe Y a little bit to scale it out like that. But inside of our editing mode, so I'll hit Tab, we can go much more into depth. So what I want to do is I'll set proportional editing on. I'll go to face select and I'll just start trying to kind of model out some of these areas, just trying to get it as accurate as possible. We do want to hit Shift Z whenever we're doing this, by the way, just to stay on the ground plane of our actual scene. So that is looking good. We'll get this side as well, matching there. And then this side comes in a little bit there. And yeah, that is actually looking pretty decent right now. The biggest area that I'm kind of looking at is this area up here. I just want to make sure that this kind of section of our actual object matches the most, and it looks like it does right now. So yes, that is pretty much it for the model of the fountain. We do need to go ahead and smooth everything out. You can see it's a little blocky right now. So quick tip, you can hold Control and then hit 2 to add a subdivision surface modifier real quick. And then I'm going to go to Tab and then select this top face. I'll just hit I to inset that a few times. We don't want to go too crazy because we are dealing with some stuff right there. But yeah, that looks pretty good right there. Then we can go ahead, Control R, I'll just add some loop cuts and stuff up here, trying to make this seem a little bit more noticeable. So yeah, so that looks pretty good. We'll right click and shade smooth, and yeah, that is pretty much the fountain done. The final thing that we need to model out back here is actually this building in the back. We're gonna have be having some shadows and stuff up on this section of the building, so I don't really care about this side of the building, mostly just this side. So I'll hide this. We'll go ahead and go to add a cube. We'll go to Tab, G, Z. I'll just move that up 1 unit. And then I'll G, Shift Z, just move all the way back here. And then S, Y, just scale that out just so it's very long. Basically right now I just want to determine the actual rotation of the building. So something like that is looking good. I just want to make sure this bottom section is basically going along the ground plane of the building right here, and it roughly follows that right there. So yeah, so let's model this out a little bit. I might actually bring a new window out here just to view everything a little bit better. Let's bring this, I'll make this, we need to turn off proportional editing. So I'll turn that off up there. We'll go hit G, Z, just move that upwards. Go to the side view right here, G, then we'll double tap, I believe, Y. Yep, so we can double tap Y to move that along the normal, and that is looking good. We'll also just G, double tap Y again to move it all the way out here. Next, we do need to give it some depth, so I'm going to double tap X this time and just give it some depth back there. So yes, that is the basic shape of the building out. We will see that we have some kind of unique roofing and stuff back here, so I want to try to match that as much as possible. I'm going to just move this up just so we can align this corner right here. And then next we can go ahead and I'll, Control R to add a loop cut. And I'll add another loop cut going the opposite way. So Control R again. I basically just want this portion of the building right here. And I want to define the roof. And so if I add another loop cut right here, just so we don't mess up some of this topology, if I select this edge right here, I can just move that up slightly. We were so close. We were so close to getting it our first try. But let's bring another loop cut over here. And I'll go ahead and just move that up as well. There you go. So now we basically just have the roof, or the slant of our roof defined over here. And that's pretty much all I'm going to do for this shot. We can be a little bit smart in our animation to make sure we miss this very complex structure. If I was doing this for a client or anything like that, I would really make sure I get the model exactly matching the scene, both in the actual model, but also the camera tracking. But this is good enough for what we need it for. Anyways, we are now done with that, and we are ready to start dealing with some actual lighting and some texturing and everything. So first of all, let's set up some render settings. I'm going to come and go to cycles, going to render on my GPU, denoise. I'm going to set the viewport to optics, and we'll set the viewport to have a 128 sample count. Down here, we do need to use the GPU for our render settings, and then I'm also going to just set it to 512 for now. At the very end, we can maybe play around with a little bit of these just to get some more high quality results. Also, since we're here, we'll go ahead and change film to transparent, just so we have some alpha in our scene. And then finally, we do need to change our color management. Instead of standard, we need it to be AGX now. So yes, those are all the render properties that we're going to be doing. Let's go ahead and deal with some lighting. Now, the lighting for this scene is very simple. It's just a basic sunlit scene. So what I'm going to be using is I'm going to be using a HDR image today. I basically just went on Polyhaven and tried to find a scene that matched the lighting and atmosphere of the scene as much as possible. So I'll have a link down below where you can download that. You just want to come over to the world tab, go all the way up, go to color and set it to be an environment texture, go to open, and let's just open up that EXR image. Okay, so here it is. We'll select that, open the image, and now we can see we actually have some lighting in our scene. Let's Shift A. I'm just going to add a quick cube right there, just so we can test to see where our light direction is. I'll use this little guy down here as a example. But yeah, you can see our sun image, or sorry, our sun direction is basically going in the same exact direction. It might be a little bit off, so what I might do is I'll come, instead of the 3D viewport, I'll go to shader editor. We'll go to world, and then in this tab over here, we do need to go to edit preferences add-ons, and then we need to enable the node wrangler add-on. So just make sure this is checked. It comes default with Blender, and so you don't need to download anything else. So once that is checked, we can come over here. Then Control T will add a texture coordinate and mapping node. We just want to play around with this Z rotation. And so right here, that matches it much better. So just like a -4, just slightly moving that. So yes, that is the lighting done in our scene, just super easy for this scene as well. The final thing I want to do is add in the object. Now, depending on whether or not you want to, download my footage and files and everything, I'll actually provide the exact object I'm going to be using. But if you do want to work along for free, there are a ton of amazing objects out there. If you want to download the Blender Kit add-on, you can download, 3D assets super easily right like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and import in my model for my scene. I'm going to come up to File. We're going to go to Append. I just have it as a Blender file you can download. Okay, so here's the blend file. I'm going to click inside of that, go into Object, and then this cube right here. We can just append that into the scene, and now we actually have this object. So let's go ahead and just place it exactly where I want it in the scene. I might make it a little bit bigger, so something like that, maybe even a tiny bit bigger, so something like that. You do want to go ahead and make sure it's sitting on the ground plane. So if you zoom really tight in here, you can place it on this little pedestal that we made. And then RZ, just rotate that around a little bit. So yes, that looks pretty good for now. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like in rendered. So yes, that is looking decent. I might come and select this and might play around with a little bit of the texture. So I maybe want it a little bit more saturated and a little bit darker, perhaps. And then we'll turn the roughness down just so it introduces some reflections in our scene. And then the specular I might also turn down as well, just so we don't have as harsh of white highlights on the actual sun. So yes, that is the texture of that finish. Now what we do have is we have a lot of white bounce lighting kind of bouncing up onto this thing. We actually need to go ahead and talk about some textures. So I'm going to come back to the object tab over here. We can go ahead and add a new footage material. I'm going to Shift A and add a image texture node right there. And we can plug the color into the base color. and let's open up our EXR image sequence. Okay, so here's my footage again, just that EXR sequence. We can open up that image. I'm going to go ahead and turn auto refresh on. We need to set this to sRGB, and then this to be set to mirror, just so everything is projecting okay down here. Next thing, you need to Control T to add a texture coordinate mapping node, and let's set it to window instead of UV for the vector. So now you can see we actually have our texture projected onto there now. Let's turn the roughness all the way up and then the specular all the way down like that. It's still a little bit too light for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a RGB curves node. So we'll just add that here, and we'll just take the gamma down ever so slightly. So something like that. Just so it matches kind of our footage a little bit better. So that is our footage material. We do need to apply that to all of the things that are going to be reflecting light in our scene. So that is the building. So we'll add the footage to that, and then also our ground plane over here. So we'll add the footage to that. Now the ground plane is actually correctly set up now. You can see that our shadow is being cast on it, but these two things are still being seen in the actual scene. So what we need to do is we need to select both of these objects. So I'll select this one first, go to the object properties all the way down to visibility, and turn mask shadow catcher on. We'll do the same thing for the pedestal, so shadow catcher on. Now we can only see the shadow on our object. So yes, that is pretty much everything set up in terms of lighting and texturing. We need to go ahead and talk about animating right now. So what I basically want to have is I want to have this object right here just spinning in place, and then all of a sudden it just flies up and flies out of screen. And so that's super easy. What we can do is I want to go ahead and Shift A. We can add a curve, and we're going to basically animate along a curve right now. And curves, you can think of it just as a path inside of Blender. So we have this curve here right now. In order to actually get it to follow along with this object, I'm going to go ahead and Shift A. We're going to add a empty plane axis right there. And then in the constraints tab, we're going to make sure the empty actually follows the path. And our target, of course, is going to be the Bezier curve. So now we have this. You can see the empty is basically exactly along like that. Now, one thing we do have to set up real quick is make sure it follows the curve. You can see as we play around with this number, it'll actually rotate along with the curve of the actual path. And so that's good and exactly what we need. Let's just reset this back to 0 right there. And then we do need to go ahead and position this curve to be exactly in the middle of our object. And so right now we only care about our empty. And so I'll just place this empty. You can see it barely right there. I just want to place this in the exact kind of middle of the object that we have set up right here. And then I'll move it over like that. And the reason we want to do that is because we basically want this empty to basically be exactly where the object is at the very start. After that, it'll actually spin up and kind of fly away. So let's go ahead and deal with the actual animation of the curve and everything. So I'll come to the top view. If I actually rotate, I can hold Control and snap that. I basically want to snap it until it's directly straight like that. And then if I come over here, I can just rotate that and snap that up just so it's straight up and down like that. That is the basic kind of starting point that I want my thing to be. Again, because wherever this curve is going to be, that's actually what the animation is going to look like. So we'll keep it right there. I'll bring this out like that or something like that. And then I'll hit E to extrude that. We might have it, come out here. I'll see how it looks on the camera. Yes, I might have it come like up here and fly away out of screen up there. And so this is where you can have a little bit of fun with it, animate your actual path and see how it goes. But yeah, so I can mess around with this all day. That's the basic process. You just want to kind of edit your actual curve to actually make it animate. Anyways, now that we have all of that set up, let's go ahead and start parenting this stuff so we can actually see some animation. First thing I do want to point out is we do want this empty to be directly up and down at the very start. You can see it's directly up and down, and so that is the nice thing. We want that because that will actually influence the actual rotation of this object on the ground. So what we can do is I'll select the object. So I have the object selected. Then I want to shift click this empty right here, and then Control P to set parent to object. Now wherever we move this around, it'll actually move the object around as well. So that is nice. Let's go ahead and animate this offset. So at around 2 seconds is where I want the actual animations to start. So I'll go ahead and hit I over here to add a offset at 0. Then around 140 is when I actually want the object to fly out of the scene. So I'll animate this offset value. You can see it's actually following the curve, which is nice. We'll just animate that till it goes off screen up here. So that is -136 for me. Let's hit I again to add another keyframe. And now you can see the animation actually takes off and actually goes above the building and everything. So that is nice. Now this is a part you do want to double check your geometry. So if I actually come up here, you'll see that a lot of the shadow is actually going across the part of the geometry that we actually didn't model out. So this is where you want to come and go to edit mode, maybe change around the actual trajectory of these, some of these kind of sockets up here. So now it's actually going on that roof section that we had modeled out before and everything like that. So you just want to be conscious of that, because whatever you do, it'll actually decide where the shadow is going to go. So yeah, so we have that animation now. The only other thing that I kind of want to do at the very end of it is to have the kind of model be spinning around at all times. I'm just going to quickly do that. If I hit N, go to the item panel, we'll do the Y rotation, just hashtag frame and then divide it by 10. Basically, all that is doing is it's just doing a animation to where this number is going to go up constantly. And so we don't actually have to set that animation. That is basically what's called a driver inside of Blender. So yeah, see now you can see the driver basically just lets it spin constantly, and it continues spinning along our little axis up here. So that is looking good and exactly what I want. We are now ready to start breaking this up into passes, so we can go ahead and export this out to After Effects. So first of all, we'll come over here. This is all looking good. Now I do want to have my main object be its own pass, and then the shadow be its own pass as well. So if we right click, we'll add 3 collections. First of all, I just like separating the camera into its own collection. So I'll place that up there. Next, we'll just place the object into it. So this is a logo. This is actually a logo of the company that I'm designing and making. And so stay tuned for that as I give you guys more information about what is coming out. Anyways, we'll have that right here. I'll put the curve, and then we'll also put the empty in there as well. And then real quick, we do need to put this cube 02 in there as well. So we now have all of those objects in there. Finally, we just need the cube, the cylinder, and the ground. All of these are just the objects of the actual scene. And so we'll go ahead and place that into the collection 3, and I'll name this one Shadow. Again, just because that's all of the objects that are actually going to be casting the shadow onto, just to organize everything a little bit better there. So now that we have that, we do need to make a new view layer. So we'll add a new view layer. This one, I just want to be our shadow. And then so for our shadow, we'll come out, put a new filter onto that. This filter right here. This is the indirect only filter. Basically, this is going to allow us to control what's actually being seen in each view layer. And so for the shadow view layer, I want the logo to be indirect only, just so we only see the shadow in our scene. Next, we can come to the foreground. I'll just quickly name that to logo to keep things organized. And we want the opposite. We want the shadow to be indirect only. So yeah, so now we have multiple passes inside of Blender. Let's go to compositing. I'll duplicate this logo section out to add the shadow. And then what I want to do is I want to do a quick test render. So let's render the image. Okay, so here it is. Let's come back out of here. And now if we hold Shift, Control, and then click, we can see the different passes. So this is the logo pass, and then this is the shadow pass. That is exactly what we want. We can actually go ahead and just delete all of these nodes up here. We don't really need them for this tutorial. Let's go ahead and render this out. So I'm going to go add a file output node. This node is basically just going to allow us to actually render out multiple passes at the same time. We can go to node, properties, add a image socket down here. I'll make this first one just logo. And then this second one, I'll name shadow. And then after we have that, I am going to be saving it as PNG with alpha channel. Let's save a new folder location. Okay, so once you have that, let's hit accept. Let's plug the logo into the correct socket and then the shadow into the correct socket. And this is where you want to do some of your final checks, maybe do a couple of, test renders at certain frames. What I actually ended up doing, let's go out to layout section. I do believe I changed this one up. I just multiplied that by 2 to have a 1024 sample count. And then also down here for motion blur, I just changed the motion blur down to 0.3. I just felt the default 0.5 shutter was a little bit too much motion blur, especially with drone footage. I find drone footage is very high shutter speed. And so that basically means that there's going to be less motion blur in the actual footage. And so I just wanted to match it to the actual footage as much as possible. I don't have any of that actual information of the camera, but I'm just trying to eyeball it and guesstimate what I would think and what I would expect seeing footage like this. Anyways, that's pretty much everything set up. The final thing we need to do is just come and render the animation. Okay, so once your render has finished, you should have a folder that looks like this that has a bunch of logo sequences and then also some shadow sequences. So now we're ready to go ahead and launch After Effects to do the final composite. Okay, so inside of After Effects, let's go ahead and import in everything. So I'm going to right click, import multiple files. We'll start with the first logo pass. So logo right here, you want to make sure PNG sequence is selected. We'll import that. Then we'll scroll down to the very first frame of our shadow. So shadow 01, import that. And then finally, we just need the footage. And so that is my EXR sequence. So we'll just import that as well. So we'll hit done. The next thing, we need to match all of these frame rates. So I'll go ahead and interpret the footage, and it's a 23.976 frame rate. So I'll just copy that, hit OK, and we need to do the exact same thing for our other pass as well. So now all of the frame rates match. And then the final thing that I need to do, since this is an EXR sequence, Adobe is a little bit strange with EXR sequences. So let's go ahead and right click. I'll go to interpret footage main. Instead of the main options, we need to go to color and just preserve preserve RGB up here. So we'll hit OK. And then we'll drag our footage into the main section down here, and everything is looking nice and accurate like that. Next, we'll drag the logo down here as well, and then the shadow pass in between those. And so, so this is the result that we would have gotten straight out of Blender. You can see it's not terrible, but we can get it a little bit more accurate, especially with the shadows. I think we can match that a lot better. So for the shadow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and Control-C, Control-V, and duplicate this layer. Let's go ahead and set the track map to shadow. If you don't see this, you can toggle these switches and modes down here, by the way. So now that we have that, what we can do is we can come to this view layer that, again, we're having the track matte selected. We can go to Effect, and what I want to do is I want to go ahead and color correct. So we'll go to color correction. I like to use the levels for any of my luminous changes. So what I can do is I'll go ahead and mess around with some of this. I just want to match the shadows of some of these guys down here as much as I can. So we'll just turn this one down. I might also get the gamma slider and just play around with this a little bit. So that's looking a little bit better. Well, two things I notice is, first of all, we can see that a lot of the color is still coming through, whereas, some of these values would actually be very crushed just because no light is actually getting to it. But also it's a very red tint up here. You can see the shadow is giving off a little bit of a red tint, whereas these shadows down here are much more of a blue tint. That is typically what is of shadows that are affected by the sky. Whatever shadow that actually has the sky mainly as being its indirect lighting, it's always going to be a little bit of a blue tint. And so let's keep both those things in mind. So first of all, what I always find with shadows in sunlight environments is if you add a little bit of decontrast to it. We'll go to color correction, brightness contrast. I'll put this at the very first thing. And I just want to make the contrast much less. You can see it basically just crushes a bunch of those values and tries to middle them out. And that is what actual shadows are doing in real life, just because, again, no light is actually hitting them. And so all of those contrast is basically being lost. So anyways, we have both of those things now. We'll add another effect, color correction, and this time I want to use curves. And curves I just like using to do any of my actual coloring instead of just the levels. So I'll come down to blue. And again, we just want to add a little bit more blue tint into the shadow. And so I'll zoom in here. I'll just make the blue channel and set that up higher. So now you can see there's just a blue tint to the actual shadow, which is matching much more realistically, in my opinion. So yes, that is looking pretty good and matches pretty well. You can see we're getting better results in the whites and the darks and everything. So yes, that is the shadow done, I believe. We can go ahead and mess around with the logo as well. So we'll come down here. First of all, I do want to do some basic color correction to the logo. So we'll come add an effect. We'll go down to color correction. And then I want to go to, we'll add a levels. Right down here, I might just brighten it up ever so slightly. So something like that. And then might mess around with a little bit of the blacks and whites. So something like that. Just adding a little bit more contrast here as well. Now the CGI is way too sharp in my opinion. So we do need to defocus that a little bit. So we'll add an effect, go to blur and sharpen, and then camera lens blur right here. I believe I settled on a 0.1 camera lens blur. You can see it just blurs it ever so slightly into the scene, and it's not reading as sharp anymore. So yes, those are the two main things I did for the actual CGI. The final thing that I want to tackle is the actual grain. Now every footage that you shoot in, no matter how great the camera quality is, has a little bit of grain. This camera is actually a pretty decent drone, and so we can see there's not a lot of grain, especially if you look really close into stuff. But I do want to try to match it as much as possible, because if it's not there, if you really punch in, you might notice it. So let's go ahead and add an effect. I just like using, if we go down to noise and grain, go to match grain, and then we'll just go ahead and set the source layer to our 4th layer, which is just our original footage. And then instead of preview, we'll just do final output. So yeah, it might be very, very hard to notice, but we actually have some moving grain into our shot now. It just helps blend in the CGI a little bit to our scene. So yeah, so that's pretty much all I did for this shot. You can of course play around with it, maybe add some more effects if you want, but it's very simple compositing for this shot. Let's go ahead and render this out. So I'm going to go to File. We're going to export and then add to render queue. This is totally dependent on what you actually want to render this out as. If you wanted to render it out for Instagram or anything like that, I'll show you kind of the 2 methods, one for the best quality and then the other one for the best compatibility if you are rendering this out for online. So first of all, for the best online quality, we want to click that button right there. Format, I like to just render everything as a QuickTime. So we have QuickTime up here, and in format options, we can just set this to H.264. I find that that's just the best codec that a lot of people prefer if you are uploading stuff to online. So that is the best kind of thing for that. Next, instead, if you want the best kind of quality for your video, if you're sending this out to color or anything like that, we can set the video codec. Instead of that, we can set it to Apple ProRes 4444. So that's one option if you do want to send it to an editor. So yeah, so we'll hit OK over here, OK down here. We do need to set a new folder location. So I'll just version this up real quick. So version 2, and we can finally just render the animation. Okay, so here is the final result that we got from this video. You can see that we matched the lighting and everything is looking pretty good. Hopefully you guys were able to get a similar result or learned a thing or two on the way. Blender is very powerful as a CGI tool to do all this realistic stuff, and this is probably as simplistic as you can get to use it inside of with After Effects to get a pretty cool result. Anyways, I do have a Patreon and a couple of courses if you are interested down below. Again, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Out Artlist, for sponsoring. Of course, you can check out the affiliate link down below if you do want to check them out. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.